Cole Hardin stood at the edge of Miller's Bend and could not stop smiling. The wooden sign at the gate was cracked and faded, but it was his. After 10 long years of working other men's cattle, mending other men's fences, and sleeping in other men's bunkhouses, Cole finally owned a piece of land that belonged to no one but himself. The ranch was not much to look at. The barn leaned to one side like a tired old man. Weeds grew tall where crops should have been. The fences had holes big enough for a horse to walk through without even trying. But Cole did not see broken wood and dead grass. He saw a future. He saw mornings where he would wake up and call the land his own. He had bought Miller's Bend for almost nothing. The ranch had been empty for 3 years, and nobody in town wanted to touch it. Some folks said the land was unlucky. Others said the last owner left in the middle of the night without telling anyone why. Cole did not care about old stories. He cared about the soil, the water nearby, and the wide open sky above it. That was enough for him. On his very first morning as the new owner, Cole climbed onto the barn roof with a hammer and a bag of nails. The sun was warm on his back, and the birds were singing like they too were happy for him. He hummed an old tune while he worked, feeling lighter than he had in years. Then he heard the sound of hooves. Cole looked up and saw a rider coming down the dirt path toward the ranch. It was not a rancher or a farmhand. It was a young woman on a beautiful black mare, her clothes far too fine for riding through dust and weeds. Her boots were polished. Her hat sat perfectly on her head. Everything about her looked expensive, like she had stepped out of a picture in a fancy magazine. Cole nearly lost his footing on the roof. "Careful up there," the woman called out, a small smile on her lips. "I did not come here to bury you." Cole climbed down quickly, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Can I help you, miss?" "My name is Eleanor Whitfield," she said, watching him closely. "I believe you just bought this ranch." Cole's chest tightened at the name. Everyone in the territory knew the Whitfield family. Harlan Whitfield was the richest rancher for 100 miles, owner of more cattle and land than most men could count in a lifetime. And this woman, sitting so calmly on her fine horse, was his daughter. "Yes, ma'am," Cole said slowly. "Bought it just yesterday." Eleanor tilted her head. "Then you should know something. My father wants this land back. He sent me here to make you an offer." Cole raised an eyebrow. "An offer?" "Double what you paid," Eleanor said simply. "In cash, today if you like." For a moment, Cole almost laughed. Double the money for a ranch he had not even started fixing yet? Most men would have jumped at such a deal. But something about the way Eleanor spoke, so calm and sure, like she already expected him to agree, made Cole feel stubborn instead. "I'm sorry, Miss Whitfield," he said, standing a little taller. "This ranch is not for sale. Not for double, not for triple. I worked too long and too hard to get here." Eleanor's smile faded. For the first time, something like worry crossed her face. "You don't understand what you have gotten yourself into, Mr. Hardin." "Maybe not," Cole said, "but I intend to find out." Eleanor studied him a moment longer, then turned her horse without another word. She rode off in the direction of the Whitfield estate, leaving a trail of dust behind her. Cole watched her go, his mind full of questions. Why would a millionaire rancher want a broken-down piece of land so badly? And why did his daughter look almost afraid when Cole refused? He turned back toward the barn, ready to return to his work, when something near the old well caught his eye. The recent rain had washed away some of the dirt, and now a small corner of rusted metal was peeking out from the ground. Cole walked closer and knelt down. It was a strong box, old and rusted, half buried in the earth, and carved into the lid, though faded with time, were 2 letters that made his heart beat faster. H.W. Cole stared at the rusted strongbox for a long time before he touched it. The initials H.W. were carved deep into the metal lid, and he did not need anyone to tell him what they meant. Harlan Whitfield. But why would a rich man's strongbox be buried near an old well on a ranch he no longer owned? Cole tried to pull the box free, but the lock held tight, and the metal was too rusted to force open with his bare hands. He set it aside for later and went back to his work, though his mind stayed on the box the whole day. By evening, Cole rode into town for supplies. He noticed right away that people were looking at him differently. The shopkeeper, an older man named Mr. Doyle, leaned over the counter with wide eyes. "Heard you turned down Harlan Whitfield's offer," Mr. Doyle said, shaking his head like Cole had done something foolish. "Double the money, and you said no?" "Word travels fast," Cole replied. "Faster than a stampede," Mr. Doyle said. "Folks around here don't say no to Whitfield. Not ever." At the saloon later that night, an old-timer named Samuel leaned close to Cole over a cup of coffee. His voice was low, like he was sharing something he should not. "That ranch used to belong to Whitfield and his partner," Samuel said. "Long time ago, before you were even born. Something happened between them. Partner disappeared and Whitfield never talked about it again. Ranch sat empty ever since. Passed hands a few times, but nobody stayed long." Cole listened carefully, his coffee growing cold in his hands. "What happened to the partner?" Samuel just shrugged. "Nobody knows for certain, but Whitfield's been strange about that land ever since. Strange enough that he sent his own daughter out to buy it back from a stranger." Cole rode home that night with more questions than answers. 2 days later, Eleanor returned to Miller's Bend. This time she came alone, without telling her father, and her usual confidence seemed softer, almost curious. "You are still here," she said, watching Cole repair a section of fence. "Where else would I be?" Cole answered, wiping sweat from his brow. Eleanor dismounted and walked closer, looking around at the small changes Cole had already made. The barn no longer leaned quite so badly. The weeds near the house had been cleared. It was not much, but it was progress. "You work harder than most men I know," she said. "I have to," Cole replied. "This ranch is all I have." For a while, they talked without any tension between them. Eleanor asked about his plans for the cattle, and Cole found himself explaining his dreams with more excitement than he meant to show. She listened closely, and for the first time, she did not look like a rich man's daughter sent to buy him out. She looked like someone who was genuinely curious. Then, almost without meaning to, Eleanor said something that caught Cole's attention. "My father has not slept well since he heard this ranch sold," she admitted. "He keeps asking if the new owner found anything unusual on the property." Cole's stomach tightened. He thought of the strongbox still sitting in his barn, waiting to be opened. "Unusual like what?" Eleanor shook her head. "I don't know. He won't say. But it's not like him to worry over dirt and fence posts. There is something else going on, Mr. Harden. Something about this land that troubles him." Cole chose not to mention the strongbox. Not yet. He wanted to understand it himself first. That night, after Eleanor rode away, Cole sat in the barn with a hammer and an old chisel, working carefully at the rusted lock. It took nearly an hour, but finally, with a loud creak, the lid gave way. Inside, Cole found a folded photograph, yellowed with age, showing two men shaking hands in front of a much larger stretch of land than Miller's Bend alone. Beneath it lay an old land deed and a sealed letter, the paper worn soft with time. The envelope was addressed simply, "Whoever finds this." Cole's hands trembled slightly as he broke the seal, unsure if he was about to solve a mystery or step into something far bigger than he ever expected. Cole unfolded the letter with careful hands, the old paper crackling softly in the quiet barn. The handwriting was shaky but clear, written by someone who seemed to know his time was running out. The letter told a story Cole never expected. Many years ago, Harlan Whitfield and a man named Robert Miller had been partners, sharing a much larger stretch of land that stretched far beyond the borders of Miller's Bend. Together, they had built something good, splitting the land and the water that ran through it fairly, or so Robert Miller believed at the time. But the letter explained that when the official survey was done to mark the boundary lines, Harlan had quietly paid the surveyor to shift the lines in his favor. The change was small on paper, just a few markers moved here and there, but it was enough to give Harlan control of the only water source that fed both properties. Robert Miller did not discover the truth until years later, and by then he had already lost too much to fight back. He left the land, broken-hearted, and Miller's Bend passed through several owners until it finally sat empty. The letter ended with a warning. Whoever found the strongbox held proof that could undo everything Harlan Whitfield had built, because the original deed inside showed the true, unbroken boundary lines before they were ever changed. Cole sat back against the barn wall, stunned. He now understood why Harlan wanted the ranch back so badly, and why Eleanor said her father could not sleep. This was not about land or water. This was about guilt hidden for decades, and fear that the truth would finally come out. The next morning, Cole rode to find Eleanor before he could talk himself out of it. When she saw the seriousness in his face, she agreed to speak with him privately near the creek that ran along the edge of Miller's Bend. Cole showed her everything: the photograph, the old deed, and the letter. He watched her face carefully as she read, hoping she would not turn away from him because of what her father had done. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached the final lines. "This cannot be true," she whispered. But even as she said it, Cole could see the truth settling into her eyes. Certain things now made sense to her, small comments her father had made over the years, his refusal to speak of Robert Miller, his strange sadness whenever the old ranch was mentioned. "I always believed my father built everything fairly," Eleanor said quietly. "I did not know this was hiding underneath it all." Cole did not push her. He simply waited, letting her find her own way through the shock. After a long silence, Eleanor looked up at him, her eyes steady despite the pain behind them. "We have to speak with him," she said. "He deserves the chance to explain, and the truth deserves to be known." Cole nodded. Part of him worried what a man like Harlan Whitfield might do when cornered with such a secret, especially one that could ruin his name across the entire territory. But he also knew that hiding the truth now, after everything, would make him no better than the men who had buried it in the first place. Together, they rode toward the Whitfield estate, the folded letter tucked safely inside Cole's jacket. The ride felt longer than usual, the wide open land stretching endlessly under a sky turning gray with clouds. Neither of them spoke much, both lost in their own thoughts about what was about to happen. As they came over the final hill and the grand Whitfield house came into view, Cole noticed something that made his stomach drop. Harlan Whitfield was already standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching them approach as though he had been expecting them all along. Eleanor slowed her horse, glancing at Cole with wide eyes. "How could he possibly know?" she whispered. Cole did not have an answer. All he knew was that whatever came next, there would be no turning back now. Cole and Eleanor stopped their horses at the bottom of the porch steps. Harlan Whitfield stood tall and still, his face unreadable, his eyes moving from his daughter to the folded letter peeking out of Cole's jacket pocket. "You found it," Harlan said simply. His voice was not angry, only tired, like a man who had carried something heavy for far too long. "How did you know?" Eleanor asked, sliding down from her horse. "I have waited for this day since the moment I heard someone bought Miller's Bend," Harlan admitted. "I always feared the strongbox was still out there, buried where I left it long ago." Cole dismounted slowly, watching the old rancher carefully. He had expected anger, maybe even threats. Instead, Harlan looked almost relieved, as if a weight he had carried alone for years was finally about to be shared. "Come inside," Harlan said. "It is time I told the truth. All of it." Sitting in the quiet study, surrounded by old maps and dusty books, Harlan did not deny a single word written in Robert Miller's letter. He admitted that greed had blinded him many years ago, that he had paid the surveyor to move the boundary lines, and that he had convinced himself the wrong was small enough to ignore. "But it was never small," Harlan said quietly. "I told myself I would fix it one day. One day became years, and years became decades. And somewhere along the way, I lost more than land. I lost my peace. I lost time with you, Eleanor, because I could never look at you without thinking of what I had done." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, not only from anger, but from years of confusion finally making sense. She had always felt a distance in her father, a sadness he never explained. Now she understood where it came from. "What happens now?" Cole asked gently, breaking the heavy silence. Harlan looked at him with something like respect. "You could have used this to ruin me, Mr. Harden, or to demand a fortune for your silence. Why haven't you?" Cole shook his head. "I did not buy Miller's Bend to destroy anyone. I bought it to build something honest. Taking advantage of this would make me no different from the men who caused the harm in the first place." Harlan nodded slowly, as if he had needed to hear those words for a very long time. "Then tell me what you believe is fair." Cole thought carefully before answering. The original boundary should be restored. The water rights should return to Robert Miller's family, wherever they may be found. And Miller's Bend keeps enough land to stand on its own, free of your shadow, Mr. Whitfield. Harlan agreed without hesitation. In the days that followed, he worked with local officials to correct the old boundary lines, and he sent word out to search for any living relatives of Robert Miller, determined to make amends after so many years of silence. The town buzzed with the news, but instead of scandal, most folks respected Harlan for finally facing what he had done, especially since it was his own daughter who had encouraged him toward honesty. As the weeks passed, Miller's Bend began to flourish under Cole's care. The fences stood strong, the fields turned green again, and the barn no longer leaned to one side. Eleanor visited often, at first to check on her father's promises, but soon simply because she wanted to be there. She admired the way Cole worked with his hands and his heart, both fully committed to the land. And Cole found himself looking forward to her visits more than he ever expected, drawn not to her family's fortune, but to her honesty and quiet strength. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in gold and orange, Cole stood at the newly repaired gate of Miller's Bend. Eleanor rode up beside him on her black mare, smiling as she looked out over the land that once held so many secrets. "It finally looks like a home," she said. Cole nodded, feeling a peace he had never known before. "It always was," he said. "It just needed someone willing to uncover the truth and start fresh." Together, they watched the sun disappear behind the hills, the ranch finally free of its old shadows and full of new beginnings.